2, 1. Very good at calling meeting order.
Good morning. You don't have that on USB, so you just hit the button. We welcome to the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee. I believe that we have a quorum. Joining me are Representative Seth Chase, the Vice Chair of the committee, and then Senator Pearson is here.
Hello.
And on Zoom, we have Senator Chittenden and Representative Sibilia. This morning, and I'm Senator Randy Broad. This morning, we have a somewhat packed agenda between 9 and noon today. And the first item on the agenda is one that we have attempted unsuccessfully to go through in detail in earlier meetings. And as a result, we've made it the first item on the agenda today. And Secretary Quinn, the Agency of Digital Services, Scott Carby, the Chief Information Officer of the Agency of Digital Services, and then Doug Rowe, the interim CIO of the Vermont Judiciary is here. The representative of the legislature unfortunately had to be away today and is not able to join us. So why don't we start with Secretary Quinn?
Yep, I'm just trying to log on to it now.
Maria, would you preferably close the door? You don't mind? Thank you.
For the record, I'm John Quinn. I'm the Chief Information Officer. Scott Carby, the Chief Information Security Officer. Very similar, but
One's more secure than the other.
one's more secure than the other. Scott has a presentation that he's going to pull up for the committee today. I believe you all received it last night. And we'll try to take a deeper dive into the application inventory and risk profiles that we've discussed.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. There is a portion, I believe, of your presentation today in which we're going to talk about some of the security issues that have resulted in some applications being rated as higher risk than others. And the portion of the meeting that is devoted to going into the details of security issues will be conducted in executive session.
Yes, that's correct. We're going to need to, because of the detail we plan to give, not only about the system name, but what we see as some of those vulnerabilities and the larger impact to Vermont.
I'm in.
And I see we're also joined by Representative Marty Feltus this morning.
Thank you.
Online.
Apologize for my technical lag here for just a second.
It's kind of comforting that it happens to you too.
That's all of us.
I've got like 7 or 8 phones at home. I work for the phone company. They're all like that broken, it don't work.
Okay. I'm just going to try to share this up. You'll forgive me, I don't use Zoom on a daily basis.
I gotta mute you. Otherwise we get the feedback loop. There you go.
Thank you.
And just as a refresher, this application inventory is something that ADS has been working on. This is something that we took on when we first became an agency to understand what we had out across the enterprise, because we really didn't know. We didn't have a list. So, you know, we've put together a list of all the different applications across state government. We started with over 1,400 applications. I believe we're down to about 1,168. So through consolidation, through, a number of different factors, including our preferred platform strategy, we've been able to reduce our overall application list quite a bit, saving Vermonters money and becoming more efficient across the board and being able to actually work on and keep these systems up to date.
Good morning, everybody. As Secretary Quinn said, for the record, I'm Scott Carby. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the Agency of Digital Services. This presentation that I have for you today, some of it's going to be a repeat of what we talked about a couple of months ago, because we were pretty rushed, and I know that everybody wanted to make sure they got an opportunity to see it, understand it, dive into it. So if some of the things that I'm recovering you don't want to hear, just tell me to move on. I'm perfectly happy to hear that. So one of the first things that we had discussed was our method that we used for this risk inventory, or risk-informed application inventory. And as we began identifying, and I know, I'll forget whether people's titles, I think Senator Chittenden had asked about different domains of risk. This risk list is currently focused purely on cyber risk. So we can talk about other domains of risk when we sort of, when we're in it, however you want to ask questions. But I focus this risk-informed list on the cyber risks from within my area of expertise.
As you list, if I could just interrupt for a second, as you list the domains of risk that might be considered, how would you define them?
So there are, so cybersecurity would be one, technical risk would be another, business operational risk would be another, financial risk could be another. There's, we can keep going down through that list, but primarily we started with cyber. We would definitely be looking to expand that as a next step to technical and some operational risk. We won't be able to do as much as I would love this list to be an all-encompassing everything today, it's not there. But as we refine within one domain and we start saying, hey, let's take a step to these next criteria and these next criteria, that risk-informed list becomes a sort of richer, deeper dive, giving you folks especially a much better sense of the overall risk of the systems. But again, as a caveat, I just want to keep saying where I'm.
I guess that's my question is that one of my understanding of part of the reason or a major reason why we started the inventory in the first place is also to identify technical risk, and by that I mean the risk of catastrophic failure, the risk of an antiquated system, a system that can't be maintained, a system like the Department of Labor system, and are we in fact in this process that we're talking about identifying and classifying perhaps as high risks those systems that fall within that category as well?
So I think we have multiple work streams going at the same time. Just because of the amount of work that has to go into this. Each agency IT lead that works for me is developing a 5-year plan. And in that plan, it talks about those things of, what the future plan is, who it affects, what the, financial costs of those things are. So we have that work stream going at the same time we have this work stream going, and eventually they'll be merged together, or we'll have a better holistic picture of those technical risks that you talk about. This is all part of the maturity of the agency and really being able to bring each agency secretary or commissioner a list of their applications, showing them overall risk, right? And no one should know better than the agency secretary or commissioner on who it affects, right? How many Vermonters? What's the financial impact? Can we not get out checks? Can we, you know, all those different things. So we're going to need to work with the business side on some of those things. We're starting with the things that we can work on ourselves to give us a better picture on the technical side.
Thank you.
Sure. To refresh your memory, I used a very simple method. I used 4 criteria. I used the software platform, the hardware operating system, the data type that's being stored in the system, sensitive or not sensitive, and whether the system has an internet presence. I assigned a numerical score, very simple scoring system, and I'll talk to you about that here again in just the next slide or two. And the bonus about having one person, so the inventory itself was informed by all of the IT leads, the other area directors who own these systems. But I personally sat down and went through line by line on all of these applications to assess the risk of each application at this initial 4 criteria high level. So having one person's set of eyes on it means that we don't have one person who thinks a system is risky and another person who thinks, well, I've got other systems that are riskier, so this one isn't risky. I can look at them all sort of holistically, as the secretary said, and using that numerical scoring, take some of the subjectivity out of it, but also be able to consistently score across those domains where we don't have well-defined data fields. And certainly when we get into the executive session portion of this, we can talk about some of those inconsistencies across those data fields.
Okay. Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Ask a question. Scott, the web presence is obviously a category to keep in mind, but can you help me understand, all of our systems are part of a network. And so is there a big distinction between, or maybe what is the distinction between, since I'm going to guess that very few of our systems are isolated and not attached to the network and therefore to the internet?
Sure. Yeah. The web presence I defined as your ability as either a member of the public or a member or an internal state employee to use a web browsing technology to get to that system and be presented with some level of authority on that system, whether it's read, write, execute, whatever your level of authority is when you get there. We do absolutely have systems that have no external web presence, no web browser internally to get to them. They are simply an application that serves and supports. So that's where those sort of 3 tiers come from.
That sounded pretty technical to me. So the way I would describe it to the public is, you know, you think about it like the DMV, you have your front office staff that see the public every day. Those are what we're talking about with a real web presence. And then you have your back office people, the people that never really truly interact with the public face to face. And that's really the difference here.
But in terms of the risk, it's not, I mean, an aggressive actor it's not a lot easier to get to the web-based applications than it is to something else we have on the network, or maybe it is. Can you?
It absolutely is.
Okay.
If we are providing a web presence with a system, we have provided either a pinhole or sometimes a larger hole through our security systems for somebody to get to that system.
Okay, thank
And
you.
so those internal systems that are only applications that serve up a very specific purpose and are databases that store sensitive data that have a very specific purpose, those security systems have, I would like to say no holes, but there are much, yes, it's a much less porous environment to get to those.
Thank you.
A determined attacker is always going to find a way to get to a system. But by providing a web presence, we introduce a level of risk to those systems.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure.
For those members of the committee who are remote today, we can't necessarily see you if you have a question. So please do just interrupt if you will, so that you can be recognized.
Chair Brock, may I be recognized?
Certainly, Senator Chipman.
Great. So it somewhat picks up on Senator Pearson's question there. And I'm curious, Scott, if you, in identifying this list, did you use a network scan vulnerability tool? I have some familiarity with that in years past, things like Tenable, or is this all just from how did you capture the list of identified softwares, and did you do it systematically with any type of automated software?
Yes, that's actually a really good question. We use the IT leads in their respective areas who have a responsibility for their portfolios to report to us what the applications are that they have. In other cases, you always want to verify or have overlapping controls. We have numerous systems within our platform inventory that can pull pieces of data and information across. One of those is a vulnerability scanning tool. Another one is an endpoint protection tool. Another one is our edge firewall security systems. So we can take all of that information and balance that with what an IT lead, let's use the Agency of Transportation, for example. He could say, I have these 75 applications. We can then scan and say, maybe there's 78, or we can say we can only see 72 of those. And that's how we begin to refine and assess where we're at with our tools and the information that we're presenting.
And so the tools that Scott's just mentioned, I have to take a moment and thank you all, because those are all new tools since ADS has been created. On how we do things and how we scan for those types of vulnerabilities. So certainly thank you for continuing to fund additional cybersecurity requests from us.
So, I apologize, go ahead.
I was just saying thank you. My apologies. I was just trying to say thank you. It was awkward Zoom talk.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So you've seen this slide before. This is how I assess the risk. This is how the scores were generated. Again, the primary, we've already talked to some extent about the web presence and how it was scored. Sensitive data is scored either it's sensitive data, the system has sensitive data, or it doesn't have sensitive data. We didn't want to get into the nuance of how important one person's PII was versus one person's one person's personal information versus somebody's personal health information versus somebody's financial information. If it's sensitive data, we categorized it in one lump so that we are protecting that sensitive data with whatever level is deemed appropriate to protect that. As I said before, the software platform that the application is built on and the hardware platform that the application is built on are key to us understanding the underlying vulnerability of the system. This is the same example. I didn't create a new example for you guys this time. But basically, this is a very typical view into the way an application gets to the state that it's currently in on our network. And we have a lot of applications in the inventory that are in the 6 to 8 year range. when they were built on the latest hardware platform, using the latest software services, using the latest website software, and they protected the sensitive information adequately. But as you can see, over time, when a system works, I often, and you'll forgive me for using car metaphors, but if your car is running and you can go out and you can start it and you can drive every day, that's very much the mentality of folks that maintain and use applications. If it's working, we don't want to mess with it, right? It's vital that somebody gets their checks this month, or it's vital that somebody can access their immunization data. So if it's working, there's often very little change to that system, but over time, that system becomes riskier. And in this case, 6 or 8 years ago, it would have been 2012 servers, version 2012 servers that were built out. Those are now in extended support from Microsoft. So we consider that a high level of risk, not the highest level of risk, because there is still security updates going to those servers, but a higher level of risk than what a new system would have. Questions on sort of the way the example is scored? No? Excellent.
And just to expand on that a little bit, to shed a little light on, some of these things, so say it's a 2012 server. The application that runs on that server may not support a newer operating system, which then, increases our risk because we have to stay on that older operating system and try to find ways to protect it. And to change out a major application every time that happens becomes more and more challenging and can be financially burdening as well to each agency. So there's multiple things that go into why a system may be a little bit older.
Mhm.
So this was when we did our analysis across the applications, and as the secretary mentioned, about 1,160 applications. This has changed even since we built this risk list, and as of, Tuesday, I think we were at 1102. This shows the distribution across agencies and major departments of where our software is, and I believe in the last meeting, Representative Feltus helped me out with explaining why labor may have fewer applications and why the Agency of Natural Resources may have more. But this distribution shows us a lot of what we suspected, right? The Agency of Human Services, being the largest agency in the state, has the most applications. Agency of Transportation is right up there. And the Agency of Natural Resources has a lot of small programs and small applications that help support those programs. So it was good for us to see this distribution, to understand where we can target our assessment and our risk mitigation techniques. And and it just sort of tells its own picture.
Well, and it checks us on, where our resources are across the enterprise as we evolve as an agency to make sure we're right-sized in those areas based on, percentage of applications to users to technical support.
Senator Pearson.
The AHS, as you say, it makes sense that they're most, but when we imagine, we've also been particularly investing in new systems there around integrated eligibility and all of that. And I'm curious, when that has been completed, does that correspond to a significant reduction in the number of systems there? Is that a streamline? I mean, as I understand it, integrated eligibility, and we're probably only a quarter of the way along, but is the vision is a streamlining that would be hopes to be dramatic. And I'm just curious what we would imagine that bar to look like after that. Any sense?
So there's two pieces to that. One is that as we consolidate into our larger enterprise level platforms, right? Like our Salesforce and otherwise, we will be reducing the number of servers, the number of individual hardware systems and software platforms that are out there. But the applications themselves may simply shift from being its own self-contained application on a cluster of servers with some SQL software behind it to an application that runs on the Salesforce platform. So the application numbers we may stop seeing a big decrease in the actual number of applications, but the number of underlying systems that support those will be a significant decrease in.
And there's other things behind those things, like getting off a 45-year-old mainframe as well, right?
Yeah. And if I could just follow up, AOT, that's a surprising one to me. I mean, this seems like a pretty straightforward agency. Just help us understand, why is it that they have so many systems? Was that surprising to you? And just a layperson, why?
Yeah, so they're an agency of about 1,300 employees, I think. And, you know, they have a vast number of duties. While, you know, snow plowing is certainly, you know, something that I always think of when you think of AOT, their engineering department and the number of tools that they need, as well as storage systems and different things to connect, runs up that number pretty quickly. There's a number, and I was surprised by this, and that, as you guys know, all the IT procurements run through my office. There's a large number of specific pieces of software that are really customized for engineers to be able to do their job, whether it's, you know, figuring out the weights for the bridges or those types of things that really rack up that number. In that is also the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Okay.
Right. And so when you think about their old processes and old systems and each application that did one specific little thing that sits on the mainframe that's 45 years old, it adds up quickly.
Thanks.
Okay. You did see this chart last time, and there's been some changes to this chart. I did change the view rather than putting specific numbers to each column. I just thought I'd break it down in percentage for you so that it was a bit of an easier view and give you a sense of what our distribution is. One key piece to point out is where I had the need data column, the purple one all the way over to the right. I've managed to remove almost 12 applications from that just since the last time we spoke. And that's just part of an ongoing effort of pulling out the ones that we need more data on, sitting down with the IT leads, sitting down with the business leads, and actually getting the information that we need out of that to be able to do an assessment. Of those, they either moved from that purple column into the yellow column, which is like a low elevated risk, or the moderate risk. We did not create any additional high or critical applications, which is good in my mind, right? It means that where we didn't have the data on those systems, we didn't have a looming critical failure.
Now, may I just ask, is this list still solely the list of the executive branch?
Yes.
All right. And is there any movement to obtain similar information from the other branches at this point that you're aware of?
So I know that, and we've had conversations with both Doug Rowe, who's the interim CIO, and Kevin Moore, who's in charge of the legislature systems, and shared with them the risk formula that we used, as well as I think provided a template overall on what we've done. We have zero authority over either one of them.
Understood.
Units of
Yeah,
government.
my question was solely, were you aware of, and we will
I
talk
believe
with.
they're both working on it.
Yeah, we'll talk with each separately, not necessarily today, but at a point in the future to see how they're doing in similar activities.
I do believe that they're both working on it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes. And overall, my goal here is to mitigate these risks in cascading order, right? I want to focus on the critical first.
Mhm.
That's where I see I mean, obviously, if something needs to be fixed, you fix it today rather than something that simply needs maintenance that you can fix tomorrow. So our focus is on the critical systems and then into the highs. And that's where my focus is going to be for a significant amount of time. So this is new. This is where I really wanted to provide some additional analysis to the committee, where addressing only those critical most applications, these are the themes that were demonstrated across that. At this point, I'm still talking publicly available information. If you want to start taking a deeper dive, I would recommend that we no longer be speaking publicly.
Just in terms of your presentation, we'll be guided by you, because I don't know what's in the remainder of your presentation about the appropriate time to go into executive session to discuss specific security issues.
Yeah, a couple of slides from now is when I'm anticipated moving in. So the key themes regarding these are, unsupported operating systems, unsupported software platforms. I don't want to read for you, but all of those four main scoring criteria that I've spoken about, these applications all got top marks, and in this case, top marks is not good. All got top marks in these areas. And the critical applications that get the highest risk ratings have maxed out all four categories. That doesn't mean that some aren't riskier than others, but as I said, I went to a certain level and said, once I've identified a level of risk, it doesn't matter if it's house on fire or room on fire, it's a level of risk. And then those applications tend to be either in-house, contractor developed and modified systems that have been in place for some time, or highly integrated and expensive software solutions that would take significant resources to shift the way the state currently does business on that platform to either a newer version of the platform or another platform. Sorry for a bit of an eye chart here as I got moving, but the other factors that I want to bring up are complexity, custom code, and cybersecurity considerations. And with complexity, we talk about the use of multiple technologies, and here's that phrase custom code again, being built into the applications. And as an example, I want to talk about like a required version of a web platform, right? And so we alluded to this a little bit earlier with you, Senator Pearson. You can build a system and have it be 100% solid, ready to go system. And as soon as people start using it, they love it. But that platform may be built, that application may be built on a platform that is specifically tied together. And as that operating system begins to age, you can't upgrade the application because they're tied together. And so that complexity comes in. Plus, we also have systems where you may have multiple databases across multiple servers, across multiple server platforms that all one small piece of data ties together to provide a complete picture. And that's how you end up with that level of complexity. And you try to change one thing and you have to change 10 things. And once you change those 10 things, you have to change 100 things. So that's why we end up often with these applications being sort of containerized and just chugging along and being used year after year. And cybersecurity considerations, we've all been having these discussions now, certainly since I've been around and since the Agency of Digital Services has been around, far more often with the legislature. Cybersecurity has become more public. It's become more known, understood, and, you know, quite honestly, gives people pause when they think about what our current state might be. 10 years ago, when a system was being developed, it might not have been even a consideration when that system was developed. We have systems in place that interdict the flow of traffic in and out of our network. We have antivirus softwares. We have all of these systems, protective systems, but I often consider those sort of add-on security systems. If the system itself wasn't designed securely, I have to create more and more and more of those add-on systems to protect those systems. So as we move forward, secure development and a software development lifecycle that can be used and evaluated on a periodic basis is really where we want to be when bringing in new applications. And this is where I would recommend we go to the other portion of the presentation.
Then we're going to now move into an executive session in order to discuss information relating to data security, which is an exempt activity under the Public Meeting, the Open Records Act. We do have an anticipation about how long that this will take. Will this take us to the end of your time segment?
It could take us to the end of the time segment depending on questions, but I can certainly limit it to 30 minutes if that's what your preference is.
Well, it is now 20 minutes of 10. Our break is scheduled for 10:30. Let's reconvene perhaps at 10:15 from executive session, and then we'll see where we are at that point. So on that basis, we will go into executive session. I will say one question though, during the public session, we have several members of the committee who are remote and who are joining us on Zoom. Are you comfortable with the cybersecurity of the Zoom platform and the transmission of that information in that fashion?
I'm comfortable provided there's no recording going on, that there's no public viewing going on. The members of the committee, that I encourage the members of the committee to be able to see that. And while I can't evaluate the cybersecurity of the Zoom platform, certainly.
Well, I mean, that is frankly, that to me is a concern. I mean, certainly if we were dealing with national security information, you wouldn't be doing it on Zoom, would you?
I would not.
And we are talking about information that I would suspect would be useful to a bad actor who might be interested in attacking or doing something nefarious regarding the state systems. And so my belief is that probably it should be treated the same way.
I would be, the security guy in me says, I would love for there to be no external communication while I'm presenting this information, but that's certainly the case.
Well, that said, I would ask those members of the committee who are joining us remotely what your thoughts are.
So I'll offer one if I may, Chair Brock. Yeah, so I can go either way. If I'm not part of the executive session just to maintain security, that's fine. I'll say why I was interested in getting a better idea of which applications, and more specifically for the 28 critical systems, I'm interested to know the number of users that are involved, the degree of sensitivity. I saw in your criteria that you treated all PII the same, but having an idea of what that might be will help me in understanding the cost of corrective measures should that system be compromised, understanding some of the financial aspects for cost of downtime as well, all with the purpose of me knowing discreetly which systems have a higher priority so that in discrete and measured ways, that we can advocate through the budgetary process to properly fund any additional resources that might be necessary to correct the identified concerns. So if I don't get that today in this executive session, that's fine. I would just like to make sure that there's open lines of communication between Scott and myself so that I can understand any of these more sensitive pressures so that in the budgetary process that's coming January, we can make sure any concerns are funded adequately.
Certainly. Representative Feltus, do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, she's frozen.
Looks like Representative Feltus's video appears to be frozen, so I'm not sure if she can hear us at this point.
I'm getting Senator texts from Representative Sibilia saying she's having a hard time unmuting and that she would like to stay. So I would also say that I don't believe we have a quorum if we don't have those people. I don't know.
Well, I have to say that I'm frankly very uncomfortable with doing this on a public platform, which has some known security issues, at least claimed security issues. And we are talking about sensitive information regarding systems that the state depends on. And I gather that the secretary and the chief information security officer are going to be presenting to us information that is sensitive and could be damaging to the state if exposed on an unsecure platform. And I frankly wonder about the wisdom of doing that.
It looks like Representative Feltus is back live.
Representative Feltus, I had asked if you had any thoughts about this.
I appreciate your concern, Senator Brock. I really think that is important. I had the same questions that Senator Chittenden had in terms of the variety of information that may be available. So but now I understand certainly Senator Pearson's concern about not having a quorum, whether the three of you can continue and receive this information. And then at a later time, we can have a briefing when we can all be in person again about it. So it's a quandary. But I do appreciate your concern, Senator Brock, regarding the security of doing that, offering that information over Zoom. And I would excuse myself while you folks can continue that discussion if that's also possible.
And Representative Sibilia?
She continues to text me that she can't unmute. I don't know if that's.
And something I can do on my end with that. I can ask her to, and I can prompt her to in Zoom, but she has to do action on the other end.
So Senator Pearson, you indicated though that you had received a text from Representative Sibilia regarding this question.
I'd be glad to.
Okay.
Share it for the record. I want to stay. I'm having a hard time unmuting. Let's wait until there is a quorum. I cannot unmute. So she's trying to say something.
Mike, we don't have a means to have a secure phone line or something like that where they could just call in, even if it was audio only, but it was
that's
secure end-to-end communication. Because Zoom is optimized for broadcasting. Do we have other tools available?
I can reach out to
You said Kevin's out.
Kevin's out today, but I can reach out to our information security.
See if there could be a telephone line and simply the old fashioned way, relying on the phone company, of course.
I'm not vouching for it. That's outside my area of expertise.
Well, that said,
Senator Sibilia says she's going to rejoin.
Okay.
So
she's going to rejoin and try to get in to make her comment. Well, that being said, do you have anything else that would be presented in the public portion of the session that you can continue while we're checking into the phone line issue?
Go ahead.
Oh, if you do, great.
I just have the two conclusion slides about, what we've learned so far going through this.
Well, let's do that, and then we can come back to the specifics if necessary.
The other thought I had is we might be able to ask Doug to speak on the judiciary portion for a bit and then circle back after Mike does.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Or both.
Just a quick question for Scott. Would we anticipate some kind of timeline, probably not detailing each application, but now that your analysis is more and more complete, you know, at what point do we hear from you? We expect to have half of these addressed by February and so forth. Is that something you're working towards? Is that just unrealistic or what?
I would say that currently, to put a timeline to this, I'll say this as bluntly as I can. Every level we dig into deeper on each of these applications creates more questions for me. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I've had a very long career of identifying inconsistencies, and when I see inconsistencies, I want to dig into what those are. And so just a simple mismatch between one web platform and one server platform that shouldn't be possible makes me have to dig into that system. So to answer your question, I'm happy to keep you all up to date on what my progress is, but I can't really give when I think X percentage will be done. So.
Okay, fair.
That's fair enough. All right, so let's go ahead with that part of your presentation that can be public, and we'll reserve until Mike is back as to whether or not we can get a phone line in.
Sure. So really, I just wanted to make sure that you understood what we learned going through this, that most of our riskiest applications were already known. As I said, even that purple column, as we found where we needed more information, we didn't identify more risky applications. That our long-term inventory management we are moving into a purpose-built system for that. So we'll be consolidating various inventories. As I said, we have a lot of checks and balances built throughout our system, but if we have 5 systems and they all have 80% of the information, you have to figure out how to make that one good consolidated inventory. And then those future iterations will allow us to refine our criteria to track and ascertain the progress. And that is standardization of data elements, deduplication of applications across the agencies. As an example, we found that some of that reduction from the last time we were here to today was that both the Agency of Natural Resources and the Agency of Digital Services were tracking the same GIS application on the same servers, maintained by the same people. But so it was listed as 2 applications on our inventory. That deduplication is helping us reduce the complexity across the inventory. And then, as I said, deep dives on the application with little documentation. We need to assess those risks as we dig in.
Yeah, I think as we've, started building over the past couple of years, our priorities and how we assess priorities and have the agencies assess priorities, funding has been a clear impediment to moving forward on a lot of these things. And fortunately, last year, the legislature and the governor put forward about $66 million to help us with some of these highest risk systems. Were there things in that $66 million that weren't as risky? Yes. And I think those things, we testified to it and said that at the time. So I don't think there's anything that unknown here, but if I look ahead at the current year and we just look at Department of Labor, second half of the DMV system, and integrated eligibility, we can easily hit $100 million with just 3, right? And those are just 3 of many systems. So the cost or the funding for these things is something that we're going to have to address. And last year, to start this conversation, or to further this conversation, we started talking about a sustainable IT modernization fund with regenerating revenue. That ran out of time in the legislature, but that's something that I would like to take up again. While it's not going to be $100 million of regenerating revenue. It is a good start to how we fund some of these things and bring down the level of risk.
Senator Brock, I spoke with our IT team and our IT security person, specifically Ryan Torres. He's watching the YouTube and he understands your concerns. He said that a phone line would be less secure than the end-to-end encryption we have enabled in Zoom right now. So we have end-to-end encryption embedded in the Zoom meeting. So as soon as we go off of YouTube, he believes that's the most secure option, more so than any phone that he could bring in.
That's the most secure application, given everything that we know about Zoom. That makes me very, very uncomfortable.
I'm comfortable with Brian studying that an awful lot more than I have, so I'd be willing to support his recommendation, but
Okay.
I'll leave it up to the broader group.
Well, we have Ryan's opinion, and of course, we have the Chief Information Security Officer here, who is responsible for this entire area in question. So I'm going to toss the question to you. Are you comfortable discussing this information regarding the security of the state system on a Zoom link now? Do you recommend that we do that? Or do you recommend that we defer it until we can do that kind of briefing as a group or individually in person?
I would prefer to give the briefing in person.
Okay. Then that's why we pay you the huge amount of money that we do. And I will defer to your expertise that we will not do this over a Zoom link. That said, it becomes a question of whether or not we do not have a quorum here of the committee. And so we have our legal counsel here today. And the question is, would it be appropriate for these folks to give a briefing to 3 members of the committee in confidence today? Or should we and must we wait until we have a session in which we have a quorum to do that?
Maria Royal with Legislative Council. I think you can receive the presentation. You can't take any kind of official action without a quorum of members present physically. But you can receive the presentation.
It wouldn't be the committee though, because.
I know, Mr. Chair, we have a question from Representative Sibilia.
Sorry, do we have a question from one of the members?
Representative Sibilia's hand.
Representative Sibilia, was that? Oh, yes, I see your hand.
Thank you, Senator Brock. So given that we have 3 members, including 1 member of the Appropriations Committee and a member that works in IT that are not present, that would suggest that we probably need to give this briefing twice. And I'd like to just suggest that we move on and take it up at the next meeting and ensure that we're all there in person.
Yes, we will have another meeting before the end of September based on our planning, and that is absolutely something that we could possibly do. The question that I have for the Secretary and Mr. Carby is there anything in this briefing that you would give us that today that is of sufficient urgency that we cannot wait until later in the month to do?
No, sir.
Okay. Then is everybody in agreement that we wait until our next meeting and that we take that part of the presentation, do it at that time, but do it solely with those members who are present at the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's what we'll do. Well, thank you very much for both of you and your presentation today. It was helpful, even though it was truncated perhaps a little more than we would like. I would, at this point, though, I believe Doug Rowe is also available online representing the Judiciary. And at a high level, I would like to ask Mr. Rowe, who's the interim Chief Information Officer of the Vermont Judiciary, to perhaps tell us a little bit about risk rating, risk evaluation, risk scoring, and whatever is being done in a similar fashion in the Judiciary, if you can, at this point.
Yes, thank you, Senator Brock. So for the record, Doug Rowe, Interim Chief Information Officer for the Vermont Judiciary. The judiciary is slightly behind where the executive branch is in terms of not only identifying the application inventory, but also assessing the risks associated with that inventory. We have conducted a preliminary inventory of the applications, both used within the judiciary and those that we produce for use, either case management for judiciary staff, and also applications that are used by the users of the court. We have identified 27 thus far, 27 applications. We have not yet done a risk assessment on those applications. Approximately 50% of those applications are client-facing, meaning externally facing, outside the judiciary. Many of the applications that we've identified, because we did and I'm not sure if this is the same model that the Chief Information Security Officer used, but we also were, I think, conservative in that we included a lot of applications that are used to develop systems like Microsoft Visio, Microsoft Visual Studio, a SQL Server. Those are kind of infrastructural applications that are used internally, but we wanted to include that in the application stack simply because some of those applications may have security vulnerabilities, and if so, we want to identify them, even if internally. And by the way, I apologize for not having a formal presentation as the executive branch did. I simply have a bit of a voiceover here. We have identified with, as you all know from the last time we talked, we have recently completed an exercise to shift from a homegrown application for use in case management across the judiciary, we affectionately called VTADS, to a commercially available system supplied by Tyler Technologies called Odyssey. And the Odyssey system has multiple components to it. One is an application that's used internally within the judiciary to manage the cases within the judiciary, case files, dockets, scheduling, things like that. But there are also publicly exposed elements of the Tyler Odyssey system, such as a public portal for making payments and accessing publicly available documentation. There's an electronic filing portal, which is really a service provided by Tyler. It's not an application that we maintain, but nonetheless, it is it has data being transmitted over the lines. And we also have what we call an attorney licensing portal. It's a portal that attorneys use within the state of Vermont to renew their licenses or acquire licenses if they're new attorneys. Those are publicly facing applications. We haven't done a comprehensive security analysis on those publicly facing applications yet, although we have met with Tyler several times on the public portal and any vulnerabilities that may be identified within that public portal, making publicly available documents available. We've taken a couple of actions based on some discussions with Tyler. One of which is to put security appliances in place so that it would block bad actors from accessing anything other than what is publicly available. And we are currently working with Tyler to shore up any other security vulnerabilities, of which there are, which are minor, which are few at this point. The VTADS application, just as a reminder, it is no longer an active transactional application, meaning that the work of the court is not being conducted on the VTADS application stack.
What does that acronym mean, Doug?
Yeah,
Again,
good question. It's a great question. I should know this. Vermont Application Development System or something like that. I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I should know that. In fact, Scott might know that if he's still around. Since he was with the judiciary before I was.
Oh, he says he doesn't know either.
Okay, okay. I apologize, and I can certainly get back to the body on that. But
Okay.
we are in the process of, we have decommissioned that application and turned it into a read-only application. There are some data elements in that application that some of our staff, some of the clerks still use. So we've turned it into kind of a read-only database. And and it has no externally facing components at all. It's all internally facing. And we are in the process of completely decommissioning that application, which will occur over the next 10 to 12 months. We also use a Webex application. So we're not using Zoom, but we use Webex, as some of you may know, to conduct our hearings, our public hearings. And Webex is a tool provided to us by Cisco. We're working constantly and consistently with Cisco to ensure that there is security in in those hearings. We're also using a tool called FTR for the record, which is our recording transcription service. So it's a recording service and a transcription service for all hearings. That is a legacy system that has been around a dozen years or so. And that is a system we continually check for vulnerabilities. Two other minor points that I want to make. One is that I think I mentioned to you the last time we were together that we had conducted what I would call a high-level security vulnerability assessment of the judiciary's applications approximately 14 months ago, of which there were some action items that were recommended of the judiciary, and we're taking action on those action items. However, I will say that 14 months ago was well before we had implemented the new Odyssey platform and decommissioned the VTADS platform. So we are, our next security initiative is to conduct a comprehensive vulnerability assessment of our entire application portfolio across the judiciary. And that is something that we will be doing in this fiscal year. I'm just going to pause.
In this fiscal year, did you say?
In this fiscal year, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pause and ask what questions you may have of me regarding this, the progress that we're making on this.
And when we have the session, the executive session with the executive branch later in the month, do you think it would be useful to invite you to speak on particularly critical issues, if any, that the judiciary recognizes that should fit into that same framework, to perhaps update us in a way that should not be done in a public setting?
Yes, I agree that would be a good thing to do, and I would be pleased to do so.
Okay, good. I think one of the things that we will also be asking at that session is, and that is for all three branches, and it may well be in executive session because of the sensitivity of it, to talk about any cybersecurity issues or breaches that you have had thus far that have implications going forward, if any.
Yes, absolutely, sure. And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
By the way, you may have heard, you may have seen an announcement within the judiciary or throughout. I'm not sure where it was all communicated, but we have identified a new CIO, a candidate. She will be starting on September 27th. Her name is Marcia Shells, and she is coming to us actually from ADS. She's a well-regarded, longtime state staff employee. And it's possible that by the time we get together in the executive session that she and I will collaborate on that presentation.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Any other questions for Doug regarding the judiciary at this point? Okay. We now then have completed this portion, although we did not deal with some of the issues that we would like. And later in the session, we'll try to at least hone in on approximate time that we meet in order to do that. And make sure we get plenty of notice out so that everybody is aware of it. On that note, it is 5 minutes after 10. We were going to break at 10:15. Let's break now and take a break until 10:20. That's 15 minutes. And then start our presentation regarding the legal and regulatory issues early, because I have a suspicion that it will go longer than the allotted time that we set aside anyway. We note that we do have Maria Royal, who's going to be here talking about some of the legal issues relating to broadband and the regulatory landscape generally. But I also invited Tucker Anderson to be with us today, and he was going to eat up some of Maria's time. And this will allow, frankly, the flexibility that I think we probably do need. And Tucker is from the Office of Legislative Counsel, and he is our expert on the Open Records Act, which is increasingly something of concern regarding how we're proceeding and going forward on broadband. So I thought it would be useful to have a briefing from him about issues that are relevant to that today. So on that basis, it's 5 after. Let's take a break until 20.